Welcome back to J&M Bedtime Stories. Tonight we cover Part 2 of the 50 States of True Crime. If you like this content, please consider subscribing and turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. Now, let's get into it. Louisiana. The true crime case of the murder of Addie Hall is a tragic and disturbing story that occurred in New Orleans, Louisiana in October 2006. It involves the brutal murder of Addie Hall by her boyfriend, Zach Bowen. Addie Hall, born Adrienne Addie Hall in 1976, she was a free-spirited and artistic woman known for her bohemian lifestyle. She moved to New Orleans and fell in love with the city's vibrant culture. Born in 1978, Zach Bowen was a former Army soldier who had served in Iraq and Kosovo. After leaving the military, he moved to New Orleans, where he met Addie Hall. Addie and Zach met in 2005 and quickly became a couple. Their relationship was intense and passionate, but also tumultuous. They both struggled with personal demons, including substance abuse and mental health issues. Despite their problems, they decided to stay together and even weathered the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in their apartment in the French Quarter, becoming local celebrities for their resilience and hospitality during the crisis. In October 2006, their relationship took a dark turn. On October 17th, Zach Bowen murdered Addie Hall in their shared apartment. After killing Addie by strangulation, Zach dismembered her body. He placed her remains in various parts of their apartment, with some parts stored in the refrigerator and others cooked on the stove. He also left a handwritten note confessing to the crime and explaining his actions. The murder came to light when Zach Bowen took his own life by jumping off the roof of the Omni Royal Orleans Hotel on October 17, 2006. In his pocket, police found a note that led them to the apartment, where they discovered the horrifying scene. In his note, Zach detailed the murder and expressed his remorse. He cited his struggles with PTSD, depression, and guilt from his military service as contributing factors to his actions. The investigation into the murder and subsequent discovery of Zach's background revealed a troubled individual who had faced significant trauma. Friends and family described both Addie and Zach as deeply troubled individuals who had a volatile relationship. The case of Addie Hall and Zach Bowen has become one of the most infamous true crime stories in New Orleans. It highlights issues related to mental health, the impact of trauma on veterans, and the dangers of untreated psychological conditions. This story has been covered in various true crime documentaries, books, and articles, serving as a grim reminder of the potential for violence and turbulent relationships. Maine. The murder of Sarah Cherry is a notable true crime case that occurred in the summer of 1988 in Bowdoin, Maine. Sarah Cherry was a 12-year-old girl who was tragically abducted and killed while babysitting. The case is significant due to the brutal nature of the crime and the extensive legal battles that followed. On July 6, 1988, Sarah Cherry was taken from a home in Bowdoin, Maine, where she was babysitting. When the homeowners returned, they found Sarah missing and signs of a struggle, including overturned furniture and her personal items scattered around. 2 days later, Sarah's body was found in a remote wooded area covered with brush. She had been assaulted, stabbed, and strangled. Crucial pieces of evidence found near the crime scene and the abduction site included a notebook and a receipt book belonging to Dennis DeChain, a local farmer, Sarah Cherry's blood-stained clothing, zip ties, and rope. DeChain's truck was found abandoned not far from where Sarah's body was discovered. The investigation quickly focused on Dennis DeChain, who was a 30-year-old farmer with no prior criminal record. The evidence linking him to the crime scene, particularly his notebook and the presence of his truck, made him the primary suspect. The prosecution's case hinged on the physical evidence found near the crime scene. They argued that DeChain had kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered Sarah Cherry. While DNA technology was in its infancy at the time, the prosecution used blood type evidence to link DeChain to the crime. DeChain's defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that there was no direct proof linking him to the murder. DeChain claimed that his truck had been stolen and that he had no memory of the time during which the crime occurred, suggesting that he might have been unconscious or drugged. In 1989, Dennis DeChain was found guilty of the kidnapping and murder of Sarah Cherry. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. DeChain has consistently maintained his innocence since his conviction. Over the years, his legal team has sought new trials based on advancements in DNA testing and the claims of new evidence. In the 2000s, additional DNA testing was conducted, but the results were inconclusive or failed to exonerate DeChain. The case has seen numerous appeals and motions for a new trial, but as of the latest updates, DeChain remains in prison. The case has garnered significant public interest, with supporters arguing that he was wrongfully convicted and others maintaining his guilt based on the evidence presented at trial. The murder of Sarah Cherry and the subsequent legal battles have been widely covered in the media, leading to books, documentaries, and ongoing debates about the case. The public remains divided, with some believing in DeChain's guilt and others advocating for his innocence and a new trial based on potential new evidence and perceived flaws in the original investigation. The murder of Sarah Cherry is a complex case involving brutal crime, significant physical evidence, and extensive legal proceedings. While Dennis DeChain was convicted and remains imprisoned, the debates surrounding his guilt or innocence continue to evoke strong emotions and discussions about justice and the legal system. Maryland. The Beltway Snipers, also known as the DC Snipers, were responsible for a series of coordinated shootings that terrorized the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, as well as parts of Maryland and Virginia, over a 3-week period in October 2002. The perpetrators were John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo. Here are the detailed aspects of the case. John Allen Muhammad. Born John Allen Williams in 1960, he changed his name after converting to Islam. He served in the U.S. Army, where he received extensive training in marksmanship. Muhammad had a history of legal troubles and personal issues, including a contentious divorce and custody battle over his children. Lee Boyd Malvo. Born in 1985 in Jamaica, Malvo met Muhammad in Antigua in 1999. Malvo had a troubled upbringing and saw Muhammad as a father figure. The pair developed a close and manipulative relationship, with Muhammad exerting significant influence over Malvo. Muhammad and Malvo prepared meticulously, modifying a 1990 Chevrolet Caprice to serve as a mobile sniper's nest. They cut a hole in the trunk to shoot from while hidden inside the car. The exact motives remain somewhat unclear, but theories suggest Muhammad sought revenge against society, possibly in connection with his personal grievances and a desire to terrorize the nation. Prior to the Beltway attacks, Muhammad and Malvo were involved in several shootings across the U.S., including Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana, which resulted in additional deaths and injuries. The first shooting in the D.C. area occurred on October 2, 2002, when a man was killed in a grocery store parking lot in Wheaton, Maryland. The pair killed 5 people in a single day on October 3, 2002, in Montgomery County, Maryland, sparking widespread panic and a massive manhunt. Over the next 3 weeks, Muhammad and Malvo continued their rampage, shooting people at random, including men, women, and children, at gas stations, parking lots, and other public areas. In total, they killed 10 people and critically injured 3 others in the D.C. area during this period. The shootings led to one of the largest manhunts in U.S. history, involving multiple law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, ATF, and local police. Investigators struggled to find leads due to the random nature of the shootings and the lack of a clear pattern. Key evidence came from a series of cryptic messages left by the snipers, including a tarot card with the message, "Call me God." A tip from a previous associate of Muhammad and Malvo linked them to the Chevrolet Caprice. Ballistic evidence tied the same Bushmaster .22 caliber rifle to all the shootings. On October 24, 2002, Muhammad and Malvo were found sleeping in their car at a rest stop in Myersville, Maryland, and were arrested without incident. Muhammad was tried in Virginia and found guilty of capital murder, terrorism, and firearms charges. He received the death penalty and was executed by lethal injection on November 10, 2009. Lee Boyd Malvo, as a minor at the time of the crimes, was tried separately and received multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. In recent years, Malvo's case has been revisited due to Supreme Court rulings regarding life sentences for juveniles, but as of now, he remains incarcerated. The Beltway sniper attacks had a profound impact on the nation, leading to widespread fear and changes in public behavior, particularly in the affected areas. The case also influenced law enforcement tactics and strategies for dealing with similar threats in the future. The case highlighted issues related to gun control, juvenile justice, and the death penalty. It also sparked discussions about the influence of mentorship and manipulation in criminal behavior, particularly involving vulnerable individuals like Malvo. The Beltway sniper case remains one of the most notorious and chilling episodes of domestic terrorism in U.S. history, remembered for the random and ruthless nature of the attacks and the extensive law enforcement efforts that ultimately brought the perpetrators to justice. Massachusetts. The Boston Strangler refers to the case of a series of murders that took place in the Boston area during the early 1960s. The case involved the assault and murder of 13 women, leading to one of the most infamous crime sprees in American history. The true identity and the involvement of a single perpetrator have been topics of debate among law enforcement, criminologists, and public for decades. The Boston Strangler's victims were all women, ranging in age from 19 to 85, and the murders occurred between 1962 and 1964. The Boston Police Department, along with the Massachusetts State Police and the Attorney General's Office, were involved in the investigation. The murders caused widespread panic, and the media played a significant role in sensationalizing the case, dubbing the perpetrator the Boston Strangler. The Strangler often gained access to the victims' apartments by posing as a handyman or delivery person. The women were assaulted and then strangled with an item of their own clothing. The crime scenes often showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the victims willingly let their killer in. Albert DeSalvo was eventually arrested in October 1964 for a series of unrelated crimes known as the Green Man Assaults, where he posed as a model scout to lure women and then assault them. While in custody, DeSalvo confessed to being the Boston Strangler to his cellmate, George Nassar, who then informed his attorney, F. Lee Bailey. Bailey took on DeSalvo's case and facilitated his confessions to the murders. DeSalvo's confessions were detailed and included specific information about the crime scenes that had not been made public. However, there were inconsistencies and doubts about his ability to have committed all the murders. DeSalvo was never tried for the Boston Strangler murders. Instead, he was tried for the Green Man assaults and sentenced to life in prison in 1967. In 2001, new DNA testing technology allowed for a re-examination of the evidence. Samples from the last victim, Mary Sullivan, were tested, but initial results did not match DeSalvo's DNA. However, in 2013, further testing using more advanced techniques confirmed a DNA match between DeSalvo and the evidence from Sullivan's crime scene, providing a posthumous link to at least one of the murders. Some investigators and criminologists believe that not all of the murders were committed by the same person. Differences in the modus operandi, the ages of the victims, and other forensic evidence have led to theories that more than one killer might have been involved. There are debates about the validity of DeSalvo's confessions. Some believe he confessed for the notoriety or due to his psychological state, while others think he might have been coached on details of the crimes. DeSalvo underwent several psychological evaluations, and opinions varied on his mental state. Some experts believed he had a personality disorder, but was competent to stand trial, while others thought he was mentally unstable. The case of the Boston Strangler had a significant impact on forensic science and criminal investigations. It highlighted the importance of preserving biological evidence and paved the way for advancements in DNA technology. The true crime case of the Boston Strangler remains one of the most notorious in American history, while Albert DeSalvo's posthumous DNA link to one of the victims provides some closure. The full extent of his involvement and the possibility of other perpetrators remains subjects of debate. The case underscores the complexities of criminal investigation and the evolving nature of forensic science. Michigan. The Oakland County child killer case, also known as the babysitter killer case, refers to a series of child murders that occurred in Oakland County, Michigan between 1976 and 1977. The case remains one of the most infamous and haunting unsolved murder cases in American history. The OCCK is believed to be responsible for the abduction and murder of at least 4 children. 12-year-old Mark Stebbins was abducted on February 15, 1976, and was last seen leaving an American Legion Hall in Ferndale, Michigan. His body was found 4 days later in a snowbank in Southfield. He had been assaulted and suffocated. Jill Robinson, age 12, was abducted on December 22, 1976. Jill had a disagreement with her mother and left her home on her bicycle. Her body was found alongside Interstate 75. She had been shot twice in the face with a shotgun. Christine Mielek, age 10, abducted January 2, 1977. Christine disappeared after going to a 7-Eleven store to buy a magazine. Her body was discovered in a snowbank in Franklin Village. She had been suffocated. Timothy King, age 11, was abducted on March 16, 1977. Timothy was last seen leaving a pharmacy. His body was found in a ditch in Livonia, Michigan. He had been assaulted and suffocated. His clothing was neatly washed and pressed. The investigation into the Oakland County child killer case was extensive and involved multiple law enforcement agencies, including the Michigan State Police, the FBI, and local police departments. Despite significant efforts, the killer was never apprehended. FBI profilers suggested the killer was likely a white male in his mid-20s to mid-30s who was familiar with the Oakland County area and possibly lived there. He was thought to be someone who could gain trust of children, leading to the nickname Babysitter Killer. There were several reports of suspicious individuals and vehicles seen near the abduction sites. However, none of these leads resulted in a breakthrough. Over the years, several suspects were considered, including Archibald Edward Sloan, whose hair samples found in his car matched hair found on the victims. Christopher Bush, a convicted child who committed in 1978. Some investigators believe he might be linked to the case, but no conclusive evidence was found. Several theories have emerged over the years regarding the identity and motive of the Oakland County child killer. Some investigators and experts have suggested that there may have been more than one person involved in the murders, given the different methods of killing and the lack of a clear pattern. In recent years, investigators have re-examined the case using modern DNA techniques. In 2012, it was reported that new DNA evidence linked hairs found on the victims to the family of Archibald Edward Sloan, but this has not led to a conclusive resolution. The Oakland County child killer case has a profound impact on the community, leading to increased fear and heightened awareness of child safety. It remains a topic of interest for true crime enthusiasts and has been the subject of books, documentaries, and podcasts. Despite the passage of time, the families of the victims and the investigators involved in the case continue to seek justice and closure. The case remains open, and law enforcement agencies will still encourage anyone with information to come forward. Minnesota. The murder of Heidi Firkus is a true crime case that took place on April 25, 2010 in St. Paul, Minnesota. Heidi Firkus was born on June 23, 1983. Heidi was a 27-year-old woman married to Nicholas "Nick" Firkus. She was known for her friendly nature and involvement in her church community. Nick Firkus, born on December 20, 1982, was Heidi's husband. The couple had been married for about 5 years and were facing financial difficulties, including a pending foreclosure on their home. On the morning of April 25, 2010, Nick Firkus called 911, reporting a home invasion. He claimed that an intruder had broken into their house, and during a struggle, both he and Heidi were shot. When police arrived, they found Heidi dead from a gunshot wound and Nick with a gunshot wound to the thigh. Nick Firkus told the police that he had heard noises and, believing there was an intruder, armed himself with a shotgun. He stated that he and Heidi went downstairs where they encountered the intruder. According to Nick, there was a struggle, during which Heidi was shot in the back and he accidentally shot himself in the thigh. The investigation raised several questions about Nick's account. Police found no signs of forced entry, and neighbors did not report seeing or hearing anything unusual. It was discovered that the Firkus home was in foreclosure, and the couple was scheduled to be evicted the next day. This fact was initially unknown to Heidi's family and friends, raising suspicions about Nick's possible motives. The trajectory of the gunshots and the positions of the bodies were scrutinized. Some experts questioned the likelihood of Nick's story, suggesting the possibility of an alternative scenario. For several years, the case remained unsolved, with Nick maintaining his innocence. However, in 2021, significant developments occurred. Re-examination of physical evidence with advances in forensic technology and renewed scrutiny of the case led to re-evaluations of the evidence. On May 19, 2021, Nick Firkus was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in connection with Heidi's death. Prosecutors alleged that Nick had staged the home invasion to cover up the murder, driven by the couple's financial problems and the impending foreclosure. In 2022, Nick Firkus stood trial for the murder of Heidi. The prosecution argued that Nick's financial desperation and fear of losing his home led him to murder his wife and fabricate the home invasion story. The defense maintained that Nick was innocent and that the evidence was circumstantial. Ultimately, Nick Firkus was found guilty of the murder of Heidi Firkus. The verdict brought some closure to Heidi's family, who had sought justice for over a decade. The murder of Heidi Firkus is a tragic case that highlights issues of financial stress, domestic violence, and the complexities of criminal investigations. It also underscores the importance of forensic evidence and the challenges in uncovering the truth in cases involving intimate partners. Mississippi. Emmett Till's case is one of the most infamous and tragic episodes in American civil rights history. Emmett Lewis Till was a 14-year-old African-American boy from Chicago, Illinois. Born on July 25, 1941, he was raised in a relatively progressive urban environment. In August 1955, Emmett traveled to Monet, Mississippi to visit relatives. The South was still deeply segregated and racial tensions were high. On August 24, 1955, Emmett and a group of teenagers went to Bryant's grocery store and meat market. Accounts vary, but it is said that Emmett either whistled at, flirted with, or touched the hand of Carolyn Bryant, a white woman who was working at the store. This behavior was considered highly inappropriate and dangerous for a black person in the South at the time. 4 days later, on August 28, 1955, Emmett Till was kidnapped from his great-uncle Moses Wright's home by Roy Bryant, Carolyn's husband, and his half-brother J.W. Milam. They took Emmett to a barn, brutally beat him, gouged out one of his eyes, and shot him in the head. They then tied a 75-pound cotton gin fan around his neck with barbed wire and dumped his body in the Tallahatchie River. Emmett's mutilated body was discovered 3 days later in the river. His face was unrecognizable, and he could only be identified by a ring he was wearing, which belonged to his father. Mamie Till Mobley, Emmett's mother, made the courageous decision to have an open casket funeral, allowing the world to see the horrific extent of the violence inflicted on her son. Photos of Emmett's body were published in Jet magazine and other media outlets, sparking national and international outrage. Ron Bryant and J.W. Milam were arrested and charged with Emmett Till's murder. The trial began on September 19, 1955 in Sumner, Mississippi. Despite overwhelming evidence, including eyewitness testimony from Moses Wright, who bravely identified the kidnappers, the all-white, all-male jury acquitted Bryant and Milam after just 67 minutes of deliberation. One juror reportedly said they took a soda break to stretch the deliberations to an hour. Following their acquittal, Bryant and Milam admitted to the murder in a 1956 interview with Look magazine, protected from further prosecution by double jeopardy laws. The article, titled "The Shocking Story of a Proved Killing in Mississippi," detailed their actions and motives, further inflaming public outrage. Emmett Till's murder became a catalyst for the civil rights movement. It highlighted the brutal reality of racism in the United States and galvanized activists to push for change. Figures like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King were deeply affected by the case, and it helped to inspire pivotal events like the Montgomery bus boycott. Emmett Till's story continues to resonate today as a symbol of the fight against racial injustice. In 2007, the U.S. Justice Department reopened the case but closed it again in 2021 without new charges. Carolyn Bryant, who played a central role in the events leading to Emmett's death, lived much of her life in relative obscurity, but in recent years, there have been calls for her to be held accountable. Emmett Till's legacy is preserved through educational programs, memorials, and in the arts. The Emmett Till Interpretive Center in Sumner, Mississippi, aims to educate the public about his life and death, and the Emmett Till Memorial Commission works to honor his memory and promote racial reconciliation. In summary, Emmett Till's case is a harrowing reminder of the pervasive racism and injustice that existed in America and serves as an enduring call to continue the fight for civil rights and equality. Missouri. The disappearance of the Springfield Three refers to the unsolved case of 3 women who vanished from a home in Springfield, Missouri in the early hours of June 7, 1992. Cheryl Levitt, age 47, a single mother and cosmetologist. Suzanne Susie Streeter, age 19, Cheryl's daughter. And Stacy McCall, age 18, a friend of Susie's. On June 6, 1992, Stacy and Susie graduated from Kickapoo High School. They spent the evening attending graduation parties and initially planned to spend the night at a hotel, but decided to stay at Susie's house instead. The 3 women were last seen in the early hours of June 7, 1992, around 2 a.m., when Susie and Stacy arrived at Cheryl's home at 1717 East Delmar Street. Friends and family became concerned when they couldn't reach the women. By late morning, Stacy's mother, Janice McCall, visited the house. She found the front door unlocked, the lights on, and the women's cars parked outside. Inside, personal belongings such as purses, keys, and cigarettes were untouched. The house showed no signs of a struggle. Cheryl's bed appeared to have been slept in. The family dog, Cinnamon, was also inside the house and appeared agitated. Friends and family who had entered the house inadvertently disturbed potential evidence before police arrived. The most prevalent theory is that the women were abducted by one or more assailants who managed to control all 3 without leaving obvious signs of a struggle. Another theory suggests that the women may have interrupted a burglary and were subsequently taken by the intruders. A tip claimed that a green van was seen near the house around the time of the disappearance. However, this lead did not yield any conclusive results. Robert Craig Cox, a convicted kidnapper and robber who was living in Springfield at the time, claimed to know the women were dead and their bodies would never be found. However, he has not provided any verifiable information. Bart Streeter, Susie's older brother, and Daryl Moore, a former classmate, were both investigated but cleared of any involvement. In 2007, reporter Kathy Baird and her colleague Rick Norland claimed they had detected disturbances in the ground at a parking garage. Despite their findings, police did not pursue this lead, citing insufficient evidence. The case remains unsolved, and it continues to be one of the most perplexing mysteries in American true crime history. The Springfield Police Department still considers it an open case and follows any new leads. The community and the families of the missing women continue to seek answers and closure. The case of the Springfield Three has had a significant impact on the local community and has been the subject of numerous documentaries, podcasts, and true crime shows. The mystery of their disappearance remains a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring hope for justice. Montana. Carrie Swinson's case is a harrowing true crime story that unfolded in the mid-1980s in Montana. Carrie Swinson was a competitive biathlete known for her athletic prowess and as a member of the U.S. biathlon team. The events that transpired significantly impacted her life and drew significant media attention. Carrie Swinson was a well-known athlete in her early 20s, training for the Olympics. She worked at a lodge in the summer of 1984 located in Big Sky, Montana. The lodge was a remote area, perfect for her to continue her training routines and enjoy the serenity of nature. On July 15, 1984, while on a training run near Big Sky, Swinson was abducted by Don Nichols and his son, Dan Nichols. The Nicholses were survivalists who lived in the mountains away from society. They had the bizarre plan of kidnapping a woman to keep as a mountain bride for Dan. Swinson, unfortunately, became their target. The Nichols father and son duo ambushed Swinson, restrained her, and held her captive in a makeshift camp in the mountains. They intended to keep her there for an extended period. Swinson was forced to stay with them, and her situation was dire. She tried to escape, but was recaptured by the Nichols. Swinson's disappearance prompted a search party. Her friends, family, and local authorities were determined to find her. On July 17th, 2 days after her abduction, Alan Goldstein, a friend of Swinson's, stumbled upon the Nichols camp while searching for her. A confrontation ensued during which Don Nichols shot and killed Goldstein. In the chaos, Swinson was shot in the chest but miraculously survived. Despite her injury, Swinson managed to survive until she was rescued. Her rescue came after she had endured days of captivity and significant physical trauma. The Nichols father and son fled into the wilderness, sparking one of the largest manhunts in Montana's history. They were eventually captured in December 1984. The Nichols faced serious charges for their actions. Don Nichols was convicted of murder, kidnapping, and other charges, receiving a lengthy prison sentence. Dan Nichols was also convicted but received a lighter sentence, as it was argued that he was under his father's influence during the crime. The ordeal left Swinson with physical and emotional scars. She endured a long recovery period but demonstrated remarkable resilience. Swinson returned to competitive biathlon and continued to live an active life. Her story became widely known, symbolizing survival and the strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. The case drew significant media attention and was covered in various true crime documentaries and articles. It highlighted issues related to wilderness safety, the dangers of survivalist extremism, and the impact of violent crime on victims and communities. Carrie Swinson's story remains a powerful example of survival and resilience, illustrating the profound effects of crime on individuals and their ability to overcome extreme challenges. Nebraska. The Starkweather-Fugate killing spree, also known as the Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate spree, was a notorious series of murders that took place in the late 1950s. Charles Starkweather was born on November 24, 1938 in Lincoln, Nebraska. He grew up in a working-class family with 7 siblings and struggled academically due to a speech impediment and myopia, which made him a target for bullying. He dropped out of high school and worked various low-paying jobs. Carol Ann Fugate was born on July 30, 1943 in Lincoln, Nebraska. She met Starkweather in 1956 when she was 13 and he was 18. They began a relationship which her family disapproved of. On November 30, 1957, Starkweather committed his first murder. He killed Robert Colvert, a gas station attendant, during a robbery. The spree began on January 21, 1958, when Starkweather, accompanied by Fugate, went to her family home. Starkweather shot and killed Fugate's stepfather, Marion Bartlett, and her mother, Velda Bartlett, and her 2-year-old half-sister, Betty Jean Bartlett. The pair then went on a killing spree across Nebraska and into Wyoming, resulting in 10 more murders. On January 29, 1958, Starkweather and Fugate were captured near Douglas, Wyoming. Starkweather was apprehended after a high-speed car chase and shootout with law enforcement. Starkweather was extradited to Nebraska and charged with multiple counts of murder. He claimed that Fugate was a willing participant, while she claimed she was being held hostage. On May 23, 1958, he was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. Starkweather was executed in the electric chair on June 25, 1959, at the Nebraska State Penitentiary. Fugate was tried separately and maintained her innocence, claiming she was an unwilling accomplice. On November 21, 1958, she was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Fugate was paroled in 1976 after serving 17 years in prison. The Starkweather-Fugate killing spree has left a lasting impact on American culture. The case inspired numerous films, books, and songs, and it remains one of the most infamous true crime stories in U.S. history. The spree raised questions about juvenile delinquency, the death penalty, and the nature of evil, sparking ongoing debates and analysis. The case highlighted issues of juvenile delinquency and the influence of media on youth. It raised questions about the death penalty and the treatment of young offenders. The sensational murder of the crimes captivated the public and the media, contributing to the couple's notoriety. The Starkweather-Fugate case remains a significant and haunting example of a true crime spree in American history. Nevada. Tupac Shakur, a highly influential American rapper, was murdered on September 13, 1996, in Las Vegas, Nevada. His death remains one of the most talked about unsolved cases in the history of hip-hop. Tupac Shakur, also known as Tupac, was not only a rapper but also an actor and social activist. He was a central figure in the East Coast-West Coast hip-hop rivalry that defined the 1990s. Signed to Death Row Records, Tupac was a key player in the West Coast hip-hop scene, often at odds with artists from the East Coast, particularly those associated with Bad Boy Records, such as the Notorious B.I.G. Tupac attended the Bruce Sheldon-Mike Tyson boxing match at the MGM Grand Hotel on September 7, 1996 in Las Vegas, Nevada. After the match, Tupac, Suge Knight, and their entourage were involved in a physical altercation with Orlando Anderson, a reputed member of the Southside Crips gang, in the MGM Grand lobby. The altercation was captured on the hotel's surveillance cameras. Tupac and Suge Knight left the MGM Grand and headed towards Club 662, a nightclub owned by Knight. Tupac was in the passenger seat of a black BMW driven by Knight. While waiting at a red light, a white four-door late-model Cadillac pulled up to the right side of Shakur and Knight's vehicle. An occupant of the Cadillac rapidly fired gunshots at the BMW. Tupac was hit 4 times, twice in the chest, once in the arm, and once in the thigh. Knight was grazed by a bullet fragment. Knight managed to drive away from the scene despite his injuries, eventually stopping when they were flagged down by the police and paramedics. Tupac was taken to the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada. He was placed on life support and underwent multiple surgeries. Tupac succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced dead at 4:03 p.m. on September 13, 1996, 6 days after the shooting. The investigation into Tupac's murder has been marred by controversy, conspiracy theories, and numerous suspects. Orlando Anderson was the main suspect due to the altercation at the MGM Grand and alleged gang affiliations. Anderson denied involvement and was never charged. He was killed in an unrelated gang shooting in 1998. The murder was believed to be part of the ongoing gang wars between the Bloods associated with Death Row Records and the Crips, to which Anderson was connected. The rivalry between Death Row Records and Bad Boy Records played a significant role. Some speculate that the Notorious B.I.G. might have had indirect involvement, although this remains unproven. The investigation was criticized for being poorly handled, with allegations of corruption and lack of cooperation among witnesses. Tupac's murder remains officially unsolved, with no one ever being convicted for the crime. Tupac's death had a profound impact on the music industry and pop culture. His work continues to influence artists and fans worldwide. Tupac's murder is a complex case with many layers, involving gang affiliations, personal rivalries, and industry politics, making it one of the most enduring mysteries in the world of true crime. New Hampshire. The Bear Brook murders, also known as the Allenstown Four, is a cold case that involves the discovery of the bodies of 4 unidentified females in Bear Brook State Park in Allenstown, New Hampshire. This case has baffled investigators for decades due to the complexity and the lack of clear leads. On November 10, 1985, a hunter discovered a 55-gallon metal drum near a trail. Inside were the remains of an adult woman and a young girl. They had been dismembered and wrapped in plastic. The bodies were decomposed, indicating they had been there for some time. Autopsies suggested blunt force trauma as the cause of death. On May 9, 2000, a second 55-gallon drum was discovered by a detective. Inside were the remains of 2 young girls. Similar to the first discovery, the bodies were decomposed and had been wrapped in plastic. They also showed signs of blunt force trauma. The initial discovery led to extensive searches of the surrounding area and attempts to identify the victims through dental records and missing persons reports, but no matches were found. Investigators believed that the victims had been dead for several years before their discovery. Forensic evidence conducted isotope testing on the victims' remains to determine their origins. The tests suggested that the victims had spent time in northeastern United States, particularly in New Hampshire or nearby states. DNA testing revealed that the adult women and 2 of the children were maternally related, mother and daughters. The 4th victim, another young girl, was not biologically related to the other 3. Further advances in DNA technology in the 2010s, including genealogical DNA testing, provided more insights. The testing indicated potential family connections, but still did not lead to positive identifications. In 2017, authorities announced they had identified Terry Rasmussen, a convicted murderer, as the prime suspect in the Bear Brook murders. Rasmussen was a drifter with a history of using multiple aliases. He had been convicted in California for the murder of his girlfriend and had also been linked to other disappearances and murders across the country. Among his aliases were Robert Bob Evans, Curtis Kimball, Gordon Jensen, and Larry Vanner. DNA evidence connected Rasmussen to the Allenstown victims. It was determined that he was the biological father of the unidentified girl who was not related to the other 3 victims. This relation provided a significant lead but did not fully solve the mystery of the victims' identities. Despite the identification of Rasmussen as the killer, the identities of the adult women and the 3 children remained unknown for years. Investigators continued to use advances in DNA technology and genealogy to try to identify the victims. The case has been covered extensively in the media, including the Bear Brook podcast by New Hampshire Public Radio, which brought renewed attention to the case and the investigation efforts. In June 2019, authorities identified 3 of the 4 victims: Marlise Elizabeth Honeychurch, Marie Elizabeth Vaughn, and Sarah Lynn McWaters. Marlise Honeychurch was last seen in California in 1978 with her 2 daughters. It was believed that she had been in a relationship with Rasmussen at the time. The 4th victim, Rasmussen's biological daughter, remains unidentified. Efforts continue to identify her through genealogical research. The Bear Brook murders case remains a complex and tragic story of unidentified victims and a serial killer who evaded capture for many years. The identification of the victims and the connection to Terry Rasmussen brought some closure to the families, but left many questions unanswered, particularly regarding the identity of Rasmussen's daughter and the full extent of his crimes. The case highlights the importance of forensic advancements and the persistence of investigators in solving cold cases. New Jersey. The John List family murders refers to the chilling case of familial homicide committed by John List, who methodically killed his wife, mother, and 3 children in their Westfield, New Jersey home on November 9, 1971. The case is particularly notorious due to the meticulous planning, the length of time the List evaded capture, and the shocking reasons behind the murders. John List methodically shot each family member with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun and a .22 caliber revolver. He began with his wife Helen, shooting her in the back of the head as she drank her morning coffee. He then killed his mother, Alma, by shooting her above her left eye. Following these murders, List waited for his children to return home from school. When Patricia and Frederick arrived, he shot them each in the back of the head. Later, he drove to watch his son's soccer game, brought him home, and shot him in the chest and face. John List planned the murders to minimize immediate detection. He wrote letters to his children's schools and part-time jobs, claiming the family would be on an extended vacation. He also halted milk, mail, and newspaper deliveries. List arranged the bodies of his wife and children in sleeping bags in the ballroom floor and left a detailed confession letter to his pastor, explaining his financial troubles and his belief that killing his family would ensure their souls would go to heaven. After the murders, List cleaned up, turned off the lights, and left the house, eventually assuming a new identity as Robert P. Clark. He started a new life in Denver, Colorado, remarried, and became a respected member of the community. List evaded capture for nearly 18 years. The case grew cold until 1989 when the television program America's Most Wanted aired a segment on the List murders. The program featured a clay bust of List, aged to show what he might look like after 18 years. A former neighbor in Denver recognized the likeness and contacted authorities. List was arrested on June 1, 1989, and extradited to New Jersey. During his trial, he claimed financial hardship and a fear that his family was straying from their faith as his motives for the murder. Despite his defense, he was convicted on 5 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. John List was a deeply religious man and believed that by killing his family, he could save them from the perceived indignities of poverty and spiritual corruption. His rigid beliefs and inability to cope with failure led him to this drastic decision. Psychologists who studied the case described List as a narcissistic individual with obsessive-compulsive traits who saw no other way out of his financial and personal crises. The List family murders remain a poignant reminder of the potential for hidden darkness within seemingly ordinary lives. The case has inspired books, movies, and numerous true crime documentaries reflecting society's enduring fascination with the complexities of the human psyche and the extremities of criminal behavior. New Mexico. The murder of Gurley Chu Hassenkopf is a notable true crime case that occurred in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1999. The case is complex and involves a mix of bizarre elements, including conspiracy theories, allegations of extraterrestrial involvement, and a cast of unusual characters. Gurley Chu Hassenkopf was born in Malaysia and moved to the United States after marrying Daisy Ann Hassenkopf in 1992. She worked as a bank teller in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Born Armand Chavez, Damien Hassenkopf was a con man who claimed to be a geneticist and a doctor, though he held no legitimate medical degrees. He was known for his extravagant stories, including claims of having developed a cure for cancer and being involved in secret government projects. On September 9, 1999, Gurley Chu Hassenkopf failed to show up for work at the bank. Concerned colleagues reported her missing. When the police arrived at her apartment, they found evidence of a violent struggle, including bloodstains and signs of a cleanup. The investigation quickly turned toward Gurley's estranged husband, from whom she had filed for divorce earlier that year, citing fear for her life. Police uncovered a web of deceit and bizarre connections involving Dyson. Linda Henning was a local fashion designer and a follower of Dyson Hassenkopf. She became romantically involved with him and was deeply influenced by his bizarre stories. Henning was also arrested in connection with Gurley's disappearance. An associate of Dyson, Bill Miller, was implicated as an accomplice. He had connections with both Dyson and Henning and was involved in the conspiracy. The case took a strange turn when investigators uncovered Dyson's claims about extraterrestrials and secret government projects. He had convinced Henning and others that he was involved in a grand conspiracy and that Gurley was part of a threat that needed to be eliminated. In January 2002, Dyson Hassenkopf pled guilty to the first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He admitted to orchestrating Gurley's murder, but did not provide details on the actual killing. Henning went to trial in 2003, where she was found guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and several other charges. She was sentenced to 73 years in prison. During her trial, bizarre testimony and evidence were presented, including her beliefs in Dyson's conspiracy theories. Miller's involvement remained murky, and he was never charged with murder. He faced charges related to tampering with evidence and conspiracy, but received a relatively lighter sentence compared to Henning. Gurley Chu Hassenkopf's body was never found, and her exact cause of death remains unknown. The case continues to intrigue and disturb due to its unusual elements and the charismatic, manipulative personality of Dyson Hassenkopf. The mix of true crime with elements of science fiction and conspiracy theories makes it a particularly unique case in the annals of criminal history. New York. The Son of Sam is a notorious true crime case that revolves around the serial killer David Berkowitz, who terrorized New York City from 1976 to 1977. Berkowitz, also known as the .44 caliber killer, was responsible for a series of shootings that left 6 people dead and 7 others wounded. David Berkowitz was born Richard David Falco on June 1, 1953 in Brooklyn, New York. He was adopted by Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz and grew up in the Bronx. Berkowitz had a troubled childhood marked by feelings of rejection and isolation. He served in the U.S. Army, and after his discharge, he struggled to adjust to civilian life. Berkowitz's killing spree began on July 29, 1976. His modus operandi included shooting young women, often with their male companions, in parked cars on the street. He used a .44 caliber bulldog revolver, which became his trademark. Berkowitz began to taunt the police and the media with letters. On April 17, 1977, he left a letter addressed to NYPD Captain Joseph Borelli near the bodies of Valentina Serrani and Alexander Asau, whom he had just murdered. In this letter, he referred to himself as Son of Sam and claimed that he was acting on orders from a demon that possessed his neighbor Sam Carr's dog. The name Son of Sam caught the media's attention and further heightened public fear. The break in the case came on July 31, 1977, when Berkowitz shot Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Violante in Brooklyn, killing Moskowitz. A witness noticed a suspicious car near the crime scene and provided the license plate number to the police. The car was traced to Berkowitz, who lived in Yonkers. On August 10, 1977, police arrested him outside his apartment. Berkowitz quickly confessed to the shootings, claiming that he was commanded to kill by a demonic entity. His confession was detailed and matched evidence from the crime scenes. On June 12, 1978, Berkowitz pled guilty to 6 murders and was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Berkowitz is currently serving his sentence at a New York correctional facility. Over the years, he has claimed to have found religion and expressed remorse for his crimes. Despite these claims, he remains a figure of fascination in the true crime community. The Son of Sam case led to significant changes in how serial killers are investigated and profiled. It also resulted in Son of Sam laws, which prevent criminals from profiting from the publicity of their crimes by selling their stories to publishers or filmmakers. The case has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and films, reflecting its profound impact on American culture and the collective consciousness of public fear. The fear and media frenzy surrounding the case highlighted the vulnerabilities of urban life and the unpredictable nature of serial violence.